Hundreds of schools across our province sit more than half empty. And joining us now to take us through why these classrooms are empty in Ottawa via Skype is Annie Kidder, Executive Director with People for Education. Hello, Annie. Welcome back to the agenda.
Thank you very much.
I want to begin with some figures courtesy of our friends at the National Post. This is what they said. They said that figures show that more than 1 in 5 of the TDSB's schools and programs are operating below 60% enrollment. Is this unique, Annie, to the TDSB, or is this a situation we're seeing around the province?
Well, it is the situation around the province. It's partly as a result of declining enrollment, and it's very important that it depends on your definition of empty as well. So it's not, it's like everything in education, it's not sort of black and white or simple, that things are either empty or full, but it's definitely an issue all around the province.
Is there anywhere where this isn't happening, that we're not seeing declining enrollment?
Oh, yes. So sorry, and I should have said that. So in the downtown areas of most cities, there's declining enrollment. In all of the rest of the province, in the north and rural areas, there is. But in the suburbs, so particularly in the 905 area, there's massive growth. So in those areas, in fact, schools are way too full. The school grounds are covered with portables, and they're building new schools as fast as they can.
Okay, we can debate empty, full, what those words mean. But take an example, Annie, like Eastern Commerce in Toronto. It's functioning apparently with 16% enrollment. How is that even possible?
Well, I think it's taken schools and school boards, and some of them have gone faster than others, a long time to sort of get down to the reality of the enrollment that they have now, and B, the way the funding formula works. So in a big city like Toronto, particularly in high schools, you have kids moving from one school to another, which may leave some schools with a lot of empty space. In elementary schools in other parts of the province, they may look as if they have a lot of empty space, but they actually have rooms that are being used for music rooms or design and technology, or maybe a community parent room, which don't count as school space and then look empty.
Okay, but if we're not talking about 40, 50%, this is 16%, Annie. Like, how do you even make sense of that?
I think that, it's not to say it's not happening. There are definitely some boards are really struggling with this. So there are schools in Northern Ontario also that are operating with tiny numbers of students in schools that were built for many more students. And the real question becomes, what do you do about it? So you may have a town in Northern Ontario that had a big mine, which isn't open anymore. So a lot of the families have moved away. You have a school maybe that got built for 500 kids. Now it's got 100 kids in it. What do? Do you just close the school and say you have to go to school in the neighboring town? Or do you figure out other things you can do with the school building? And I think that that's what everybody's wrestling with right now.
Okay, it's one thing to be in Northern Ontario with lesser numbers in terms of population. In Toronto, let me ask you this question, because one thing people said you could do is that you could close schools. So first of all, just tell me, when's the last time the TDSB actually closed a school?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think that but I think that it is a good question. I think that
it's been a long time. Is that fair?
It's been it's probably been 10. I actually truly don't know the answer to the question. I know that the Toronto Catholic Board closed a number of schools, and the Toronto Board has closed schools here and there over the last few years. And there are many things, come together to make it difficult. Politics does. It's always incredibly upsetting when it's your children's school that's closing. And there's always this difficulty with, okay, we're going to get everybody together. We're going to have a consultation. How do you pick? How do you make the right decision about which schools to keep open and which schools to close?
Okay, so you point out an interesting thing. That's the political angle of this, that no parent wants their kids school to close down. That is politically unsavory. Is that part of what's going on here? Trustees worried that they won't get reelected if they, school in their ward shuts down?
I'm not sure if it's anywhere, if it's trustees worrying about getting reelected. It's trustees, in this sort of difficult spot where they're representing the parents that they serve or the families that they serve and representing their school board. So I think that one of the things that's happening right now is that the province has been looking at the process by which schools close, or they like to call it consolidate because it doesn't sound so bad, so that it can be a little bit more efficient, maybe a little bit less acrimonious. And there may be times where it would be better for a board to come out and say, you know what, we know we're going to close school X, but we want to make this work for everybody. So let's all get together and talk about what are the kinds of programs that we need to have in school Y where all the kids are going to move.
Okay, in the case of the TDSB, this is a board, that often, or has at least in the past, run over budget. It's needed to be bailed out by the province. I appreciate that there are lots of considerations of why you might choose or not choose to close a school, and amongst them is, once you close a school, it's a pretty permanent decision. You don't get the land back, it's shut down. It's hard to sort of refresh, if you will, and restart. Is that part of the hesitancy?
Well, I think there are many, many reasons for it. I think it's a complex thing to decide, and it takes a lot of planning to decide where there should be a school, where do we need a new school, where is there a school that should close, where do we need programs. So I think that it's being able to take all of that into consideration and then figure out where they should be. I think one of the things that's most startling has been to us over the years is that school boards and municipalities don't have to plan together. So I'm in municipality, I'm in charge of, where new developments are going to go. I'm thinking about, I'm going to give you permits to build condos here and there or whatever. Or I know as a municipality, we need a new recreation center or there's a public health unit moving in. There's no requirement from the top, which that may change, to say you have to plan with your school board. So that when we're thinking about all of these things, which all affect families, we have to think about them all of a piece and think about them together so that we're not stuck with making a decision where we've closed a school and then we go, oh no, actually we needed a community center there, or we could have kept the school open because we needed a public library. It could have used up half the space, and that would have made it work. So they have to be considered decisions, but there is the reality that there was a baby boom. That's me. Then I had children. That was the echo boom. There isn't on the horizon another huge echo boom. But certainly demographics change. We've seen, some downtowns grow. Mostly it seems as if right now they grow with people without children, but even neighborhoods change. So you have to leave some flexibility there, but also there has to be some dealing with the reality, which is that there are fewer children. We built all the schools at a size at a certain time in our lives in Ontario, and that's changed now. On the other hand, too, we have a funding formula that was also, parts of it are still the same as they were in 1997 when schools had much higher enrollments. So you could, and you would be right, I think, make an argument that there are still parts of the funding formula that need to change so that we're not either disadvantaging unnecessarily schools with really small enrollments, like those schools in Northern Ontario, or we're not making it seem as if schools are, empty when in fact they're not as empty as they might appear on paper.
What does that mean?
Because of the way the funding formula works.
What does that mean? Not as empty as they appear on paper?
Well, again, because it has, one of the sort of unintended consequences, I think, of the initial you get this many square feet per student was we used to have a lot of grade 7 and 8 schools that had design and technology and family studies programs. Now, I'm not arguing we should have grade 7 and 8 schools. I think there's a lot of evidence that they don't work that well. But design and technology programs, on the other hand, for grade 7 and 8 students are incredibly important. They're part of building those hands-on skills that now everybody's recognizing we really need. But those programs were cut in many cases because that space, those specialized classrooms, didn't count in the funding formula. So it looked like an empty room, even though kids were going into it all day, every day, doing design and technology programs. So we have to look at that too. So again, one person's definition of empty may, if I have a school and I've got a music room in it, and kids are using it all day for all of the various music programs, it too looks like an empty room.
Okay, I'm stuck on something you said a few minutes ago, and this is the point that you made, which is that city planning and school boards don't talk to one another when you're building new communities or the demographics or community are changing. Why not?
Well, and it would be mean to say they don't talk to each other, because I'm sure they do on occasion talk to each other, but there's no sort of mandatory, you have to plan together. And in this case, and I'm sorry, I know everybody hates, sort of more regulations. I really think there has to be a thou must do this. That it doesn't make sense we actually end up in situations where we have cities, and this happens all over the province. It's not a Toronto issue necessarily, where the cities are fighting with the school board, either the municipality saying you must not close this school, or the city saying we want to buy that piece of the school or that green space, and the school board saying no, we want you to pay more. And you go, these are all of our public institutions, our public spaces, our taxpayer money, wherever it goes. But particularly in terms of planning, I think all of our goal is to ensure that families, parents and kids, from when they're very, very small, want to have places that they can go that are easily accessible. That was part of the vision, for instance, of the changes in early childhood education. The full day kindergarten was supposed to be part of an overall plan for schools as community hubs that would be operated, and that cities and school boards would work together, because cities are in charge of much of the child care, and that hasn't come to pass. So I think that in these days of fiscal restraint, and declining enrollment, and a sense, the province is saying we are spending $1 billion, this is according to the province, on so-called empty space. We have to do something about not just like how can we fix this with either band-aids or cuts, but more how can we look at structural issues or overall policy issues, like municipalities and school boards working together, and go, how do we make sure that all of the services, education, health, social service, mental health, everything, early childhood education, are all as much as possible there in one place, because that's what makes it easy for families to access them.
And as you look around the landscape, Annie, I mean, is there an example you can point to of a board closing down schools well, or dealing with declining enrollment well?
Well, I think that some boards have gone farther ahead. I mean, I'm in Ottawa right now. Next to us is the Upper Canada School Board, District School Board. They did a huge consultation a number of years ago. It was very controversial. Lots of people got really angry, but they went, this is what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to make a bunch of our schools into kindergarten to grade 12 schools. And we're going to give you many years advance notice, which they did. So they did the consultation. Lots of people were very cross. But it was a long, slow process, and I'm not sure. I haven't gone back to go, are you still all cross? But I think that what has been happening is people, come to realize, oh, it's not the end of the world if you have kindergarten to grade 12 students in one building together. High school students aren't necessarily evil. I'm happy that you thought this through in terms of a long-term plan. So, it partly has to do with being willing to make very difficult decisions. It partly has to do with having a long-term plan that's about programs as much as it is about buildings, and that you do the consultation. But the consultation can't be, it has to be real. So one of the things that's made a lot of people very upset in the last few years is that they felt as if, I'm a parent, I was on my school council, I sat on one of these accommodation review committees, we went through a whole year of meetings, in some cases they hire demographers, they learn all this stuff, and then the board closed my school anyway. And there were, in some cases there was a sense the board already knew at the beginning they were going to close this school. And so now even the province is they have to change that process too. Is there a better way to do that? Is there kind of honest conversation you can have at the start where you go, we already know we're going to do this, or you know, these are the choices we're facing in a real way, and there's no way no schools are going to close. You know, how can we move forward? And again, it has to have to do with programs, it has to have to do with education, not just money. You know, how can we make, you know, it would be cheaper to make great big enormous schools with, you know, 10,000 students in them, but would they get a good education? Not necessarily. You know, how do we do it in a way that makes good educational sense, but also understanding that, you know, I remember when my kid's school was put on a list to close, I cried. You know, it was really heartbreaking because it feels like your family. So you have to understand there is going to be an emotional part in it.
Annie Kidder, as always, thank you. Enjoyed talking to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.